no me conoces.
I've never seen you with. What is this? What is this? Wait, you look okay.
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. Let me look. Oh,
Melissa, you look like a gypsy that's going to read my fortune. So that's what it's going to be about. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Read my fortune.
Yes. Welcome, everyone. We are the Silly Mystics, co-hosting. I'm Melisa Desperak, and I'm co-hosting with beautiful, amazing Fayina Cohen. And Fayina is now going to share the topic.
So today we're going to talk about Rabia. She's a mystic and saint, a known Sufi poet as well. And she lived in the 8th century BC. And we're going to talk a little bit about her life, read some of her poetry, but also use her life as an example to speak about how challenges, difficulties, and suffering can be transformed, and how she transformed it into love and into healing and teaching others. Like, her heart is so expansive that she was able to, she went through a lot of hardship that many of us can relate to. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And she's a true mystic.
Yes.
Like us.
I mean, they even said that she might have been the inspiration for Rumi.
Yeah, she lived like 400 or 500 years before Rumi. But the style of poetry is sensual and devotional to God, and seeing God as the lover or the beloved, being the lover, and God as the beloved. So right. It might be an inspiration. Rumi wrote in a very similar style.
Right, exactly.
So she was the fourth of, I don't even know, there's how many children the family had, very poor family. And when either her parents died, or some accounts say that there was some sort of, there might have been some sort of robbery or something going on where she got separated from her family. She was a child, and at that point, young children, female children, were picked up and then groomed to become sex slaves. And I was just saying that in modern day times, we have the same thing going on right now in our country, in other countries. Young girls, sometimes by their own families, are sold into this kind of life where they have no choice. For survival, they have to do whoever is their master that keeps them, takes care of them, becomes the caretaker, but then they have to basically offer their bodies in exchange. So it really touched me, her story, because one can only assume that this is repeated sexual abuse, unwanted touch, all of that, and how bitter and broken she could have become as a result of such a hardship. And instead, she, looked inward and began to, in her poetry, you could see that she realized that to find the cure or healing for her own wounds of life, she had to go inside and search for, I'm going to read something because I felt like this is the explanation of what she was dealing with and how she became a mystic and connected to God through her suffering. This is for me, it's like being disappointed with the world and all the pain she's had to endure. So she's saying here, the sky gave me its heart because it knew mine was not large enough to care for the earth the way it did. Why is it we think of God so much? Why is there so much talk about love? When an animal is wounded, no one has to tell it you need to heal. So naturally, it will nurse itself the best it can. My eye kept telling me something is missing from all I see. So it went in search of the cure. The cure for me was his beauty. The remedy for me was to love. So for me, it was almost like she was looking, she had nothing. She had no one, she had nothing. She had no resources, but there was a knowing that she needed to cure the pain of her suffering in her life. And somehow as a mystic, it's someone that goes inside the heart and finds the beauty of God and falls in love with God, because her story is like this falling in love with God and creation. And Rabia was praying, like prayer was her way. Even though she served in a brothel, She would pray every night to God, and that her master saw her in prayer and was stunned by the purity of her prayers and supplications to God. And he just said, this woman cannot be a slave anymore. She's a saint, and freed her. So she got her freedom through another person's witnessing of this incredible, devotional prayer. And it's almost like he saw light. And there are other stories, I think, that men would come to her to the brothel, and she would almost like start her teachings with them. She started teaching them about God and creation. And though her poetry is so sensual in nature, the underlying message there is to go inside and find the soul, and not to, lose yourself in the ways of the world, as she is in probably the darkest part of humanity, serving in a brothel. She had this connection to divinity. And she talks about, she says that nothing that we do in life is not divine. So even what she did in the brothel, she felt was sacred and was an act of God. There was something there that was happening. She did not find herself impure as a result of the work she was doing. And then afterwards, she became an ascetic and, dedicated herself to God entirely and to teaching.
I feel that that's an important part that she brings forward, because I think sometimes as women living in this society and being under what, like social mores, and, we could tend to be very judgmental of ourselves, and also not being able to express ourselves erotically and sexually without feeling guilt. And here she was kind of, it's beautiful to see that someone like her was able to express that there's no right and wrong in any of it, and that to give us that opportunity to be able to see us expressing ourselves from that part, and not feeling that it has to fall into a right or wrong, or guilt or anything that in a way we're taught by society, right, to think.
I know she defies all kind of beliefs about spiritual teachers of that time, because they were all men. And here she's a spiritual teacher with this kind of past, and is revered by so many other, spiritual teachers. They place her as a saint, in the same place of sainthood. I think that's amazing, pretty amazing for 8th century. It was like Iraq.
And because there's a beautiful lineage of Sufi poets and masters and saints, and she's considered one of the first.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to read it. I found it. What a place for trials and transformation did my lover put me. But never once did he look upon me as if I were impure. Dear sisters, all we do in this world, whatever happens, is bringing us closer to God.
It's so powerful. That message, it's like reaching right into what's happening with women in terms of, any kind of sexual abuse, harassment that women experience over centuries. And it's to see it as not an impurity, to see it as something that happened, and that it requires, like she said, a cure or healing, but not to turn to bitterness or hatred. She never went there. She never went to blame or bitterness or hatred. She just saw it as an experience, and that God will never see us as impure, no matter what happens.
Right.
And I think she also talks about, I want to read something that's related to this, and this is probably how she views healing from tragedies like this. It acts like love. It acts like love, music. It reaches towards the face, touches it, and tries to let you know, his promise, that all will be okay. It acts like love, music, and tells the feet you do not have to be so burdened. My body is covered with wounds this world made. but I still longed to kiss him, even when God said, "Could you also kiss the hand that caused each scar? For you will not find me until you do." It does that. Music helps us to forgive. So powerful.
Wow, that's powerful.
To understand that even those that hurt us, that leave these wounds and scars on our bodies, on our hearts, in some way we need to reach forgiveness before we can find God. It's almost like there's no other way. And it seems like that's what she did.
Yeah.
She was wronged and hurt and probably humiliated as a child. And then to turn to a place of forgiveness and love, that's a real transformation, right? Transmuting challenges, pain, and suffering, and coming out with a heart that loves all, even her perpetrators and those who hurt her.
It's about having an open heart. And, I like to also suggest it's not only for women who are victims, but even women who made choices in their life to maybe go into that kind of life.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that could bring so many scars and so much regret.
Mm-hmm.
And it could help even women who maybe at some point in their lives felt they didn't have a choice and made a choice themselves. To be able to forgive themselves if that's what's necessary, right? Because if there was regret, to be able to have her as a model.
Yeah. And as a true mystic and Sufi, I feel like, music does have, because she mentions music has healing properties. And I found that, the vibration of music, specific kind of music, it plays with the heart. And there is a kind of healing to it. Sufis incorporate music and movement in their devotion and prayer. So there's something there. There's something about healing the heart and letting it shed of all of its burdens to come closer to God or come closer to loving ourselves. That's the important process also. Healing. She talks about healing a lot here. Healing and forgiveness as the path of the mystic. So we're all mystics if we're all in the path of healing and forgiveness.
Yes. Okay, so I'd like to read one. The way the forest shelters. I know about love the way the fields know about light, the way the forest shelters, the way an animal's divine raw desire seeks to unite with whatever might please its soul, without a single strange thought of remorse. There's a powerful delegation in us that lobbies every moment for contentment. How will you ever find peace unless you yield to love, the way the gracious earth does to our hand's impulse? To me, this is an example of the erotic poetry that she's famous for. That when you read this, it's almost as if, I think there was a lot of shock around her poetry. I think it took a long time for people to be able to look at it and understand it and to start to see her as who she was. And I think what I love about that poem is kind of allowing us to see the physical expression of intimacy being divine, that there's nothing wrong with yielding to that, and that through that you can find love.
It's incredible, really, that I'm just thinking about how many people are suffering, men and women that suffer depression or life circumstances where we feel so alone, so lost, so hurt and wounded. I mean, so many people, including us, everybody has that in their past. But to really find that inner resource that there is deep within all of us divinity, a resource for healing, the ability to access love for oneself, like to actually be in the state of love, even though nothing in your circumstances changed. What I find in all these mystics is that they have this experience, they have this ability to, through prayer, through meditation, through just going deep within ourselves, just to disconnect from worldly things and recognize that it's all right there. You don't have to go anywhere. It's like we have the pearl of great price. We have this incredible treasure deep inside, and all the answers are there too. And suffering can lift just like that if we can just access it. And because of her, you could feel there's this like in love dedication to divinity. She was able to transform everything and became a leader to others, someone to look up to. And I believe that she represents something we can all be. And how does one just do it? Through quiet, inward reflection.
Many times I feel that my personal hardships have been, are in my life very deliberately created so that I could find my way to that source, to a way of understanding grace and beauty and the divinity that's within me. And I feel that unless those difficult moments came, I don't know if I would ever found myself there, or would have ever discovered that I have that ability to connect to something higher and divine and beautiful, and find rest and solace in that place. And I know I have a friend of mine. I was just saying, I'm really happy, and I don't know why. It's just being able to be in life. It could be ordinary. It could be ordinary life, and nothing special is happening. There's no real reason to rejoice, but there's this contentment and happiness. And being able to go there is, I think, very special. And I think those moments that just of suffering that takes away everything that's superfluous and allows us to get scale in life. When we're confronted with small things, it's easy just to not suffer it, to get above it.
I was just thinking about suffering. It's almost like mystics or anyone on a spiritual path know that is kind of the chisel that creates our being, right? Without suffering, if we're just in a very peaceful, non-challenging, easygoing life, it's like a nice nap. You're napping through life. But to really have a transformation, to have the connection to the deeper truths, when we are connected to our divinity, our heart, it's almost like it's a rite of passage, going through some sort of real suffering. We're talking about real suffering, not like complaining about minor things in life, but real suffering, like loss and like what happened to Rabia. And that type of suffering, like you said, you have to turn inward. There's no other way to go. You turn inward or you turn upward, right? You turn to God or something higher outside of yourself. It's almost like because they knew that's what was necessary, they also knew that that was the material to transform. They were alchemists, able to transform their suffering into its opposite, right? Not just, okay, let me just get out of the suffering and be okay. They actually transformed it into joy, ecstasy. It's not just like Rabia is like, okay, I'm out of this brothel now, I'm free, let me just live my life, ordinary life. No, she was ecstatic in her love and wanted to share. She was also doing healings with her hands. She did so much. She allowed God to work through her. It's incredible. It's like that idea of whatever we experience on one scale, like that deep, deep, deep suffering, on the other side of this incredible, incredible joy and ecstasy. It has to balance out. And I thought of Buddha also, in the story of Buddha, how he was born into wealth, had everything he needed, wife and family and wealth. and then he just decided to be an aesthetic because he knew that for enlightenment, for attainment, he had to create struggle for himself. He didn't have to not have food. He created the struggle because he knew that that was the way. That was the only way for him to reach God. Somehow we need to shed ego desires, and just go to this place of almost like being on our knees, you know, in some way or form, where there's nowhere else to be. And then this stillness comes, and the answers flow. The answers, the truth, and this incredible openness into the moment. So I just wanted to read a poem. To me, it sounds like this was after she either had an awakening or an enlightenment, and she was already a teacher. She speaks here that I'm holding a priceless vase in my hands. If you asked me about the deeper truths of the path, and I told you the answers, it would be like handing sacred relics to you. But most have their hands tied behind their back. That is, most are not free of events their eyes have seen and their ears have heard and their bodies have felt. Most cannot focus their abilities into the present and might drop what I said. So I'll wait. I don't mind waiting until your love for all makes luminous the now. So like when I read this and I realized she's attained this understanding, deeper truths. She's holding the gift of this work, but she's recognizing that most people have to go through their own path, their own process. And if they're stuck in their past, right, there's this idea of if we're stuck in our past, we're ruminating on what we heard, what we have seen, and the wounds we have incurred, we're missing the now. So even if she's giving us a truth right now, right here, it's in my vase, no way that we'll be open to receiving it, because we can't be in the present. And she's like, I don't mind waiting until your love for all. And that love for all that the Sufi mystics describe as one you attain this oneness with divinity, with God, and your heart is open. Love for all makes luminous the now.
Right.
It's going back to the power of now, presence.
Yes.
That's the path. All the stories of the mystics and seekers of spiritual truths point to one place inside the heart, the human heart. And actually suffering is the material that creates that. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Can we feel deeply the love for humanity unless we have suffered? I know that I'm much more empathic if I've had a similar experience to one of my clients, you know, like really connect to the suffering, really know what we have to go through on this walk of life.
You know, sometimes I felt that a lot of the difficulties that I've experienced were necessary in order for me to be able to have that compassionate, empathic ability to have somebody in front of me and not judge them. It's easy to judge somebody when you think you're above everything, or you think that things can't happen to you, or you say, well, how did they allow something like that to happen to them? And then you had to experience it for yourself, so that when someone's in front of you, you realize sometimes life happens. Sometimes we even make mistakes. It's not just about life happening, but it starts with us being able to forgive ourselves and being able to love self. And then when you have someone in front of you, you could hold that energy for them. You could hold a space and help them heal. Be a mirror for them, because you could see who they are. You could see their soul without judging.
Their beauty and their light before they see it for themselves.
Right. And I think there's nothing more powerful than when you see someone else mirroring back your beauty, your divinity, love. I think is the biggest gift. There's nothing more powerful than that. Because many times I feel that there's a sense that I am beautiful. There's a sense that there's a purity about me. I sense my divinity. And yet there's so many mixed messages that as we grow up, right? That you're this and you're that and the other. And then there's a certain uncertainty about, am I the only one that feels that way? Or can someone else see it in me? And when they do, it's so beautiful. It really is. I know that I had that experience with my late husband. And I think that that's part of why we are forever connected, because we did that for each other. I think there were very few people who could reflect back to him his beauty and his he was an incredible being. And he did that for me, and I did that for him. There's nothing more beautiful than to be able to see yourself in the eyes of your beloved.
And it's amazing, that's what love does. It allows us to serve as a clear mirror for the other to see themselves, right? See their greatest potential and see all the different aspects, right? In love, we see clearly. It's the illumination of the other and of ourselves. I love that, reflecting each other in love.
And I think even there were times when he couldn't see himself
Mm-hmm.
the way I was seeing him. He eventually is kind of like allowing someone to step into that as well. It's you putting someone up here and they can step into that. And we need to do that for each other. We need to do that for our children, for our parents, our siblings.
How about anyone that we come across? I mean, the Sufis speak about that God shows up in everyone. So imagine seeing God or divinity in anyone who shows up. Then you're holding the light of their greatest possibility to them, showing it to them, and then they step into it.
Right.
You know, if somebody comes across maybe in a way that's less than pleasant, and one can remember that there's divinity even in that, what a difference it could make. And it could be a very silent holding space, like you were saying, holding space and visualizing that person and their greatest divinity and light, that their soul is present and you're in the presence of their soul. It's beauty, and it's incredible to have that possibility. And we can all do it. That's the thing. It's not like only mystics can do it.
Yes. I've actually had many moments where I've been in front of somebody and I really didn't have the right words. It's almost as if you're trying to diffuse something and you know that whatever you say is not going to calm or bring the person into harmony. So sometimes just holding that moment of presence and reflecting love back has a way of, it's quite magical. It's really beautiful to see how another person can understand that language. It's a language that you speak. It's
nonverbal language.
Yes. Yeah.
It's felt. And I find more and more like that eye contact, gazing with purity and love into someone else's eyes, whoever they are for you, opens them. So does kindness. So does attentive listening, admiration, appreciating someone. It's so simple. There's such simplicity in opening people to their divinity.
And it's instant. It's instant, right?
Instant. This ability to be vulnerable with people, the ability to really jump in and be in the heart space, that's the direction that we're all headed. That's the evolution of consciousness for mankind. And Rabia's words about like kissing the hands, I think she said something about kissing the hands of the person who has wounded you as a path of forgiveness. As radical as that sounds, there's this idea that it is possible to love everyone, even love our own scars and wounds. Because if we start to see that there's a gift in it,
Yeah.
on some really bizarre level, it's hard to admit, but maybe, like you used to say, the tyrants, right? The tyrants in our lives, are the people who have hurt us in some way. If we look at it from the perspective of the soul, our gifts, they have gifted us in our transformation or in the growth of our being or in the expansion of our hearts to be more compassionate. It's important not to stay bitter and to see all of the things that Rabia is teaching us, not to hold on to the past. There's nothing there with bitterness, to be in the presence and only shed loving kindness towards the past.
There's something also about having to be vulnerable. I know that in my journey, I spent so many years feeling in control, feeling empowered, um, secure, and there was not a lot of vulnerability to that. And then that's taken away, and you're left with nothing. And that raw vulnerability, there's something about that that's heart opening. It teaches you so much about life and people and the goodness of others,
Yeah.
the kindness of others that I would have never experienced if I wasn't in that position. And it takes away everything that is. It's a great way of chiseling away what's really was false in myself, because it was like this pride of being able to say, well, I know it sounds silly, when you talk about Rabia and what she went through, but when you could say I have great credit, right? And there's something false about that, right? The ego is taking pride in something, and that you have a certain financial status. I mean, a lot of people have difficulty with that.
Yeah.
People, what are the things that people are attached to? That they're highly educated, that they have diplomas that define who they are. They're able to feel good about themselves because they're able to hang something on a wall that says that they're intelligent. Wealth, status, beauty, being able to be physically agile or attractive or capable, and then that's taken away. Wow, what a lesson. The one thing that makes you feel it's part of the ego has built itself around that, and suddenly it's not there. So what's going to happen? And you're lucky if it happens to you before you grow old, right? Before you grow old and you're maybe more fragile and you lost your beauty and you lost your ability to be physically in the world the way you used to. And then struggling with that, then what a gift it is when you can have that happen to you at a much younger age, and then you really know what is meaningful in life. There's a real currency to that you really learn.
Like a stripping away and really accessing that which is real. And the only way to do it is through loss.
Right.
Yeah. And we've seen lots of people in our lives that have gone through that kind of stripping, whether it was financial. Many people have experienced complete drop, from riches to rags type of experiences, or loss of loved ones, loss of identity, titles. That really strips you down to what's real. And when we come down to it, we're not going to give away the secret of what's real. But Rabia, she pointed to it. She really did. She's like, I'm not going to give you the truths and the secrets. You're not going to hear it unless you're present.
Right.
And so if we can hold on to the past and lament and have regret and have bitterness and anger and stay in the suffering, or we can transform it by letting it go. Letting it all go and seeing it for what it really is. not significant. Not as significant as the human soul and the human heart and our connections to other human beings, love. But again, that teaching only comes through the experiences of life.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to read one also. It's called Jealous of a Pond. When God said, "My hands are yours," I saw that I could heal any creature in this world. I saw that the divine beauty in each heart is the root of all time and space. I was once a sleeping ocean, and in a dream became jealous of a pond. A penny can be eyed in the street, and a war can break out over it amongst the poor. Until we know that God lives in us, and we can see him there, a great poverty we suffer.
Terrible. An ocean jealous of a pond. It's like forgetting that we're souls, we're divine beings, we're this vast ocean, and instead looking for a penny.
It's kind of like the certificate on the wall and the vast wealth and all these things. And in the meantime, everything we need is within us.
Of most value and something that cannot be taken away or lost. Yeah, the only thing that's real is that which cannot be lost or purchased or sold or acquired. It's just there. It's a birthright. A birthright as human beings to have a soul.
And the thing is to search for it, to seek it, to have an understanding of what that really is.
And to feel it.
And to feel it.
Kind of to know it in the heart, to know that it's real, not just to read about it, find it, feel it, and know it. To be true. And that's the only thing that each person can give themselves, finding their own soul.
And to maybe just suggest to the audience that listens to this that maybe they could be alchemists when they're in the midst of suffering, to find that way, to reach that, to go within.
And not to be afraid of the suffering, because in the depth of the suffering, the answers lie. To dive into it. I'm just going to share how once I had a dream when I was going through a very deep suffering of losing a friend, our dear friend. And I remember in a dream being shown, like an angel came to me and said, "You see this ocean of suffering? Don't stay on the surface, dive all the way deep. Go all the way to the bottom of your suffering." It's like trying to stay afloat of the suffering, struggling. But if you dive all the way down to the bottom, and what was interesting is when I dove all the way down, there was a treasure, and there was a key or a treasure. It's like this ability to transform the suffering was only when you go right into it, not to avoid it, not to escape through substances or other escapes that we find, but go in deep, deep into it. It's not going to be permanent. Everything's transient. And at the very bottom of this suffering, there was a gift of transformation, a gift for myself. And I felt an incredible release and the letting go in that moment. Like in the dream, there was a teaching, but then there was an actual experience the next day of letting go. It was a part of me that was like struggling. My heart was like clenching and not being able to just release through crying and grief because I wasn't diving into the ocean of suffering. And I think many of us do that sometimes. We just brace ourselves or stay afloat or avoid completely. And suffering is not a terrible thing. It has
Just
something.
like Rumi said, it's a visitor. Let him in.
We're back to Rumi. So the silliness odometer today.
On 0.
Close.
No, un poquito.
I used it all up. I used it up. It was silly. It was silly. It was like.
No me dices nada. Es bien la seria de Fayina.
Listen, you just turn it on.
Next time I want to hear you talk. Russian accent.
I only work spontaneous. It comes. It comes. It doesn't. It doesn't. And you have to deal with it. You
Okay.
deal with me the way I show up.
I honor you no matter what. We're gonna do a little Rabia dancing.
Oh yeah. Rabia is amazing. We love you. Thank you, Rabia, for being amazing,
beautiful Rabia.
Inspiration in spirituality and life.
Yes. An example for all of us.